Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Increasing Competitive Advantage, Enhance Individual Competencies and Organisational Processes to Improve Project Outcomes. My name is Etty, I'm the Content Marketing Executive at ILX. I think a few more people are still coming in, so we'll just give it a couple of minutes and then we'll move into some housekeeping bits. And then I will follow on by handing over to Mike Saville, who is our head of consulting here at ILX, and Sidra Sami, one of our business development directors. Once we have a few more people just join in. Okay, I think that's probably a fair amount of people now. So we'll move on to the housekeeping bits, just as the final few people sort of filter in. Mike, do you mind flicking to the next slide? Great, thank you. So you'll notice that you've all kind of come in on mute. If you could stay that way, I don't think there's a setting that you can change it, but anyway, yeah, if you could just make sure you stay on mute, that would be great. If you do have any questions as you're going through, there's a little question box up in the corner. If you note your questions down in there, we have a Q&A session at the end, and we'll run through those at that point. Unless they're sort of technical questions, in which case we will answer as we're going through to try and get any of those issues resolved as quickly as possible. Secondly, the webinar is being recorded. You'll receive a follow-up email from us in the next couple of days with a link to watch it on YouTube, and you can sort of forward this on to any colleagues if you think they might find it useful. And then finally, we'd just like to say give us a follow on YouTube, on social media. We're active on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And there's always sort of really useful information on there about any other kind of upcoming webinars and stuff like that. So today's session, the main presentation is going to last sort of about 30 minutes. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be moving into a Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, I will hand over to Mike and Sidra to take you through the main sort of presentation bit.
Thank you, Etty. Also, warm welcome to our webinar. Today, we will be exploring how to supercharge your delivery capability by honing in two key areas, process effectiveness and people capability, and evaluating these together reveals crucial insights. But measuring project performance isn't always straightforward due to biases and preconceived notions. That's where external standards come in, and they offer an objective lens cutting through internal cultural and behavioral noise. So I'm glad that you decided to join us today as we uncover how these standards can diagnose hidden issues in your processes and capabilities, giving you a clearer, unbiased view of your project performance and to identify how you can improve it. Before we dive in, I briefly would like to introduce to you ILX and your host today. My name is Sidra Sami and I'm a Business Development Director at ILX Group. And I'm delighted to introduce you also our expert today, Mike Saville, Head of Consulting at ILX Group. So about ILX, ILX Group is an accredited training and consulting organization. I'm sure many of you joining us today have perhaps trained with us also in the past. I'd like to describe ILX as a accredited gateway to excellence in project management. It's a mouthful, but with accreditations from APM Group, APM, PeopleCert, BSc, and others, we are also trusted registered education provider with PMI and one of the largest providers of Prince 2 training globally. Our comprehensive training portfolio offers a wide variety of meeting client requirements, empowering teams, and driving measurable results. We have been around for over 30 years and of leadership in PPM, and ILX has served over 5,000 corporate clients in more than 100 countries, equipping professionals for success. Our tailored solutions include in-house training, digital platforms, immersive classroom sessions, and it's backed by an experienced customer success team delivering bespoke programs to meet diverse needs. About the consultancy, since 2003, ILEX has been a trusted partner in capability development solutions, helping clients enhance their competitive advantages to the application of process and competence models. In 2005, we pioneered the first portfolio program project management maturity model assessment, supporting clients in the US, Gulf region, Sweden, Scandinavia, and the UK. Our innovative approach has garnered praise from organizations such as the United Nations, where we have worked a number of their agencies, but also in the corporate and public sector, Vodafone, Agreco, US Department of Energy, and the UK central government, just to name a few. Before I hand you over to Mike, just a quick note to say that we are hoping to hear from you today as well and get you engaged, as we have prepared a few polls which we will run during the webinar session, and we'll share the results with you straight away to make it a little bit more interesting, and I hope you will take part in these polls. Now let's get started with the webinar. Mike.
Thank you very much, Sidra. So I'd like to begin by welcoming everybody and on my part and saying hello to you. Thanks for joining us today. And just to, as Sidra has described already, essentially we're talking about how we can improve the effectiveness of our project delivery through the development of the right processes at the right level, and also the development of the individuals who will deliver those processes in our projects. And one of the ways that we like to think about that is through the lens of the organizational models that many of you will already be familiar with, I would imagine, or come across before, which guide both the organizational capability and the development of individual capability within our profession. But to begin with, I'd just like to get you to have a quick think and reflect on perhaps what you can see on screen at the moment, which is a quotation which I'm quite fond of because it speaks to our topic today and the first part of our discussion, which is just a quick reflection on the attitudes that we bring to learning and the biases that can sometimes sort of cloud our judgment. So the quotation is this: "You will never learn anything new unless you are ready to accept yourself with your limitations. You must accept the fact that you are capable in some directions and limited in others, and you must develop your capabilities." So these are stern words, and we have a little poll for you. So just for a bit of fun, as the first one, I'd just like you to ask, who do you think is the author of that quote? So there it are. It could be The Rock, of course. The Rock's clearly all about the self-improvement. He's so keen on self-development. He's actually increased in height over a number of years. He now lists his height as about 6'4", whereas when he was first wrestling, he was 6'1", I think. So that's pretty good development. Venus, obviously, a great champion in her day, and really developed through the exercise of the family. And of course, we have the Fist of Fury himself, Mr. Bruce Lee. So, and from what I can see on the screen at the moment, we seem to be those who have voted. If you're ready to anybody else want to carry on voting? If not, it seems like half of us have done it. And allowing the tension to build for a second, I can reveal that it was, of course, Bruce Lee. Who not content with reinventing various different forms of hand-to-hand combat, he also built a career for himself in Hollywood and became a global figure simply through never accepting his own limitations and taking a very clear-eyed approach to the way that he could develop new skills and new capabilities, which would lead him to sort of be the preeminent kickboxing star of the early 70s and probably inventing a genre. Just a couple of things, a couple of lists to add to his credits alongside his many achievements in the fight scene. So just as a bit of fun, I think at least 60% of us are on the money with that piece. So let's move on. As I said, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the way in which organisations can develop a competitive advantage through taking a deliberate approach to development of capability. We'll talk a little bit about the organisational capability models, especially the P3M3 model, and the impact that they can have on the way that we develop our project delivery skills, and also the individual capability assessment models that we can look with particular reference in this session to the APM's competence framework. But to begin with, I wanted to talk to you about a bias. Okay, so surely we can understand exactly how good we are at project delivery. We get enough information back, we get highlight reports, we get feedback from our clients, satisfied or otherwise. So obviously we know when things are going well, right? Well, our two friends here on the screen, the little story that sits behind that, are an illustration of the Dunning-Kruger paradox, which is the sort of unfortunate effect that sometimes takes over our minds when we believe we know what we're doing. Okay, so these two guys, allegedly a pair of stick-up artists, who decided that they had heard that they could make themselves invisible to closed-circuit TV and security facilities in the stores they wanted to target by obscuring their faces with a bit of magic marker. And not content with just exploring this as an idea amongst themselves, they thought they'd test it, and they took some photographs of themselves. But it turns out that their ability to use the digital camera they were using wasn't spot on either. And so the fact that the pictures they took themselves were out of focus meant that when they eventually tried to stick up their local store, they were quickly captured and brought to justice. And this is an illustration, of the Dunning-Kruger cognitive bias. Our innate superiority bias, i.e. we thought of it, so we think it must be true, right, impacts our ability to assess our real levels of confidence. We are biased in favour of the idea that as something seems to have worked and we know what we're doing, we must have been doing it right. And that can sort of blind us to the other factors that were in play that might have affected our performance. So and there's a little bit of, if you Google it, you'll find a little bit of documentation about that. But I find it's particularly useful when thinking about the development of capability and competence in a delivery team. If you're starting a new project or coordinating the efforts of a PMO around how we're going to develop the capabilities of the team, we may have overwhelming, particularly at the beginning of initiative, we may have overwhelming confidence, which can lead us to being extremely enthusiastic, and that confidence may not survive first contact with the enemy, and we may find ourselves dipping very quickly in terms of our moving away from our illusory superiority, because it doesn't help us sometimes to recognize mistakes. Sometimes our biases will make us think it was somebody else, not me. It was clearly the problem lies elsewhere, not in the way that I prepared for this piece. And we don't always, as a result of that, take on the feedback that we should do. So there are a number of different ways in which we can respond to and incorporate feedback into our performance. Now, clearly on a project, some of those might be around the application of controls on the project. So how are we on track to deliver? Are we within our budget? Are we delivering according to our resource forecast and so on? And that's feedback. But there are a whole load of other factors that can take place. Are we engaging with our stakeholders in the right way? Are we anticipating the things that might go wrong and managing our risks accordingly? Are we focusing on the right things to do when we get a variation or a change? It's going to help us to take a different form of feedback in order to assess where we are in our journey towards effective delivery and how we might focus our efforts moving on. So in order to overcome these sorts of initial inherent biases, then we're a great believer in the application of sort of gathering and reflecting on feedback. Well, feedback is a gift. There are a number of different ways of addressing that, and we're going to talk about a couple in a second. But firstly, just again, another question for you in terms of poll. Should you be lucky enough to receive feedback on your performance, how would you then go about validating it? what's your preferred method? So sometimes we use triangulation. So if one person tells you something, you can go to somebody with a different perspective and just check in on them, see whether or not it's consistent feedback. We can use different modes of feedback gathering. So we might engage with one of our colleagues to sort of peer review on something to see how it's going, or we might seek out somebody who we trust as a supporter, or somebody with a good, clear view of our performance and experience of our projects and do one-to-one. Or we might set back and do some sort of reflection on that piece as well. Maybe look at self-assessment. Maybe look at the evidence of other people's behaviours on the piece. I mean, none of them are wrong, by the way. It's just a different way of going about it. So at the moment, I can see that people are voting, which is always encouraging. All I get to see is a little graph on the screen, right? And we're coming down in favour of triangulation from the looks of things. We're up to no one very interested in reflective practices on none of these as options. Quite right too. But it looks like sort of 2/3, 1/3 in favour of triangulation as opposed to sort of multimodal approach. And yeah, which is so it's interesting. I mean, we need to be able to look at the way in which we process feedback and contextualize it, so that we can then build on the things that we're doing right and extend our capabilities in the things we need to do a little more consistently in order to get the best results, in order to overcome any of the sorts of inherent biases, or to challenge those inherent biases. And one of the ways that we can triangulate is by looking at the way that capability models can give us a different view on the way in which, for example, individual projects appear to be performing, by looking at our capability as an organization. Okay, and there are specific models that support that. So, for example, the one that I work sort of most regularly with is the P3M3 model, which is Portfolio, Program and Project Management Maturity Model. This came out of the early work around quality and delivery performance that's come through, which we've seen develop through the ISO organization. So 9001, for example, has been around for a long time, telling us what the characteristics of an effective organization would be. There were also TQM, which is Total Quality Model, which came out of the Toyota organization back in the day, and it articulated for us what quality and delivery might be like, and what the characteristics of an organization doing quality right would be. TOGAF is another framework that looked at, again, different aspects of delivery. But in the Carnegie Mellon University in the early 2000s, they developed a model that drew a number of different performance areas together. The Capability Maturity Model Integration, CMMI, and that came about around about 2002. It was pushed out by their Software Engineering Institute as a way of answering, one of the purposes there was a way of answering the questions, which software organizations, you may remember, there's a bit of a boom in software changing the way that we all live, work and conduct our business in the early 2000s. And the CMMI was designed to figure out, on the part of investors, which organization will be successful, which one would still be around in a few years. What were the characteristics of an organization delivering software that could make it successful? There was nothing to do with the individuals necessarily who were running it. So it was a way of looking at the strength of the capability in the process, as opposed to the sort of CVs of the Elon Musks and so on, who were at the head of things like PayPal back in those days. So the capability maturity model had a big impact. It's the grandfather of all of these sorts of pieces, and it triggered, amongst other things, in the UK government, the Project Management Maturity Model, which the APM group developed on behalf of UK government in 2003, to be able to look at a range of different projects and say, how can we predict which one's going to succeed? And that then developed into in 2005, it matured into the P3M3 model, which added portfolio, program, and project. And it's a model that enables us to look at the health and the capacity and the capability of our organization as it delivers these initiatives. Okay? It gives us a set of indicators, and it helps us to figure out what we're good at. So it helps us to overcome any biases that we might have in terms of the types of projects that we think we run well, or the individuals who are seen as the go-to person in the organization, and helps us to see beneath that layer to understand what our capabilities might be. So a quick bit on that. So as mentioned before, it's the same structure for the model, whether it's looking at portfolio, program, or project. And each model has, all of the maturity models talk about 5 levels of maturity, and you can see in that slide at the moment, that's what's referred to as a maturity curve, which shows any organisation should be somewhere on that curve, whether that's down at level 1, which is just aware of a process, up to level 5, which is the optimised process. And so in an optimized process, we see an organization does quality management around its processes, so understand what works really well. It's gathering performance information and data all the time about how it might improve its resource management or its risk management, for example, and is able to prepare ahead for the challenges that it can see sort of coming down the pipe at it to make sure it's got the right capability to meet the challenges it's going to have in the future. It's pretty good. Level 5. Level 4 is we're getting the sort of total quality organization together. So we have metrics and information about the effectiveness of our processes. If you're in construction, for example, you might be able to develop an idea about how long it takes us to mobilize on a project, right? What the characteristics are of being able to get out a mobilization into delivery quicker and so on. Level 3 is defined. This tends to mean that we've got a set of process descriptions, and it's centralized and under the control of one person, so that when we develop a business case in our organization, we use a similar standard. Level 3 is good because it means we can also think about it, so we don't have to produce a 95-page business case where a 10-page business case will do, but we follow the same standard. Level 2 is about, you might have very capable people in a level 2 organization, but they do things differently. So there isn't a shared common centralized standard. So whilst you might get good results, it's hard for the organization to generate the right sort of results consistently because we do things differently and they're not managed. Level 1 is about an organization perhaps just at the beginning of its journey. So moving into the delivery and formalizing levels of control, but they'll be differently delivered across different projects. So any organization can be, by asking itself questions and by looking at indicators, can see where it is on that scale. So it's a progressive model. As mentioned before, there are the 5 levels in that, but it's important to be aware that an organization will move around on that scale. So if you assess yourself against something like an ISO 9001, your assessment tells you that on that day, when the assessment was completed, you were consistently aligned to a set of descriptors. But if you want to know what it was going to be like the month after or in the next quarter, when challenges are different, when resource may be constrained, when there are new types of projects that we need to deliver, then clearly the organization it may not be at the top of its performance, right? It may slip back from a level 4 to level 3, and that's not a bad thing, right? This is a progressive model, and it helps us to understand what we would need to do to reclaim ground if we've gone back, or to anticipate how we might change in response to a new type of a new challenge. I'll move on. You should know that within the model, there are a number of indicators that describe our capability at those different 5 levels. What I've done is I've quickly thrown up some example indicators from the self-assessment model, because it has a self-assessment model and a full assessment model. If you want to reflect on where you are in terms of your delivery capability, then the P3M3 self-assessment model is a great place to start. It talks about each of the 7 process areas, which we'll step through in a second. But on page at the moment, we've got some for organizational governance. So this is the capability that allows us for projects to remain in line with the strategic direction of the organization. So a process question will be at level 2. Well, we're starting to draw up rules for project approvals. Projects may be approved in a consistent way, helping us to build a picture of what's been approved and what's still in the stack. Level 3, in terms of organization, we've got people in the right roles to be able to work to a centrally defined set of governance rules. It's good. You can see that's a progression. That talks about organization. And then the third category in the self-assessment that they talk about is performance. So for level 4 for performance, it's an organization that knows what projects it's running and broadly how they align to strategic objectives. Is one that's is delivering in a managed way overall for its organisational governance, right? So there are a bunch of different aspects to it, but the self-assessment just gives you an opportunity to think in fairly simple terms in terms of process, organisation, and performance, how well you're delivering on the 7 perspectives that you find in the maturity model. So the 7 perspectives are listed on the slide there. It focuses on organisational governance, which is how we stay aligned with what the business wants. Management control, which is how we keep the projects online and control them, start, stop, run, manage variations, and so on. Benefits management, how do we make sure that the outcomes that we're producing give us the KPIs and the measures that we invested in the first place. Financial management, are we disciplined and are we using the appropriate rigor to control our budget and costs and our business cases? Risk management, what it sounds like, it's dealing with the threats and opportunities that might impact the project. Stakeholder management, how do we engage with those who influence our project, and how do we make sure that they are engaged to the right level? And resource management, how do we make sure we've got the teams and the capabilities and the assets in place to deliver it? And there are, in the self-assessment, there are questions around process, organisation, and performance for all of those. And when you do an assessment, you can just map your capability to those answers, and that will tell you something. It will tell you, it will help you to not trigger any sort of particular biases, because we can take an average across as many projects as we want to, and that self-assessment will give us a clue as to where we are. Okay, if that helps us to reconfigure our approach, or think we need to do some process improvement, that's great. Okay, there are different layers below that. If we still believe we need to challenge what the feedback from the self-assessment is telling us, we can then engage the full level of the maturity model, which has, it builds on those 3 threads that are in the self-assessment with a further 10, I think. So you can really do some diagnostic to try and figure out where the challenges are. And once you've done an assessment, then what many organisations do will then factor the feedback from that into an improvement plan that will enable them to, for example, fully document project management process and articulate how different projects will move through the different stages of the development of the controls, because level 3, which is a good place to get to, at its core has that centralized, defined set of rules and responsibilities. Or it might be that, I think as a response to this assessment, we think we need a body that sits at the hub, like a PMO, that will help us to coordinate resources and focus on development and lead the resource leveling across the whole piece in order to respond to the feedback that we're getting from our organizational assessment. So it's a great, in summary, it's a sort of great starting point for us to be able to look at our performance with a clearer eye, figure out what's going to be important to us and how we're going to respond to changes in the future, and then focus on the developments that we need to bring in to enhance our capability. And so, I mean, on the screen is a very simple diagram of just an organization that started with a base level self-assessment that showed they were mostly aware at level 1, with a couple of little bits of repeatable creeping in. And then in the top right hand, we've got this is what they were targeting, which is consolidate strengths and develop processes and build capability in order to reach that consistent sort of defined level at level 3, where all processes were set out and described and all the teams understood how they could deliver to a repeatable standard. Okay, I mean, this is the kind of thing that myself and my team at ILX will do, working with different organizations to help them to identify opportunities for enhancing that capability. So as an example, with the Greco team, we help them to refine their process capability in order to make sure that they could achieve increased numbers of complex projects without increasing headcount, help them to sort of lift their capability up to be able to and refine their processes to be able to deliver more of the really valuable solutions that they wanted to focus on. With Vodafone, able to help them by focusing on the processes that sit around business case evaluation and approval, help them to ensure that there was standardization around the way that those individual cases were developed, and that reduced a certain amount of rework, securing a significant amount of capital savings. So just a couple of examples of how this kind of approach can deliver significant improvements in the way that we run our projects. So I have another poll for you. In your unbiased view, what level of capability measure is the closest match for your project organization? Are you repeatable, which could be, we do things successfully sometimes, but we do them because of the strength of our teams? Is it defined? We've got a shared and centralized process that we work towards, and it flexes. Is it for? We believe that we are, we've defined the performance metrics that will help us to improve, and we're working consistently around that with everybody following the same process and doing things right. Or none of the above. Good. So we're settling out. It's good to see that we, as I would expect, we've got a bit of a spread in there as well. With the it looks like the highest the number of respondents coming down on the level 3 defined side, which is great news, right? If one way to check that you're not bringing a bias to that is by looking through the lens of a neutral model that helps you to break down the delivery elements out, and we said that we're not simply focusing on the achievement of outcomes, important though that is. Good. So in order to complement that, I'd like to talk a little bit about individual models as well now. So where the first piece was around how an organization can shape its resources and its capacity and its processes in order to deliver an advantage. There are clearly also models that help us to focus on our individual capability. So the APM Competence Framework, the Association for Project Management in the UK, our sort of preeminent professional body for PM delivery, has for many years been devoting a certain amount of concentrated work to articulating a competence framework for us and for the profession, and keeping it up to date as we move through different challenges around delivery. The first formal framework was put into the ground. They were developed through discussion groups and special interest groups and so on throughout the 90s. Gave the profession a place to look for a reference point. Okay, for what makes us good at planning? What does an individual have to do to understand governance, right? In the 2000s, there was a major revision that brought into line with the International Project Management Association as well. So we started to get that cross fertilization from a global perspective. In 2010, the Competence Framework 2.0, in fact, in the 2010s, it was about 2015, the Competence Framework got a major overhaul. It's brought the number of competencies down to 27 more focused ones, and brought it into line with the APM's body of knowledge, so there was consistency across what was being developed and articulated through the BOC into how individuals can conduct themselves. And then recently we had the version 3, which is a build on version 2. So they've added a couple of competencies, so we can now look at the sustainability, diversity, and inclusion and equality as how we can deliver that as extra competencies, and how we can deliver our projects. It will guide us in that way. But I suppose what this will say is that it's a framework that continues to evolve, and it continues to match to the challenges and to the changing environment that we deliver in. So how can I use that to challenge my biases? Well, to begin with, the competence framework, which you can access through the APM's website and download. In fact, if you join the website, you can even give yourself a quick self-assessment against it if you want to. But it documents the different competences, of which there are 29. So you can see bottom right in that slide, there's an example there of a sort of business case. It says a little bit about what it is. It gives you some indicators, for example, knowledge of the relevant factors affecting development of a business case, and some things to consider around your experience and how you've seen that done. And then looking at the left-hand side of the screen, we've got there the scoring matrix for all competencies, and all competencies are scored the same way. Again, so when we move through awareness to practice to competent to proficient to expert. Expert is probably the point where you're being consulted on sort of global conferences, or whether you're writing a book, or you're the go-to person in a large organization that's doing a significant amount of this. Whereas competent, I understand how to do this. I understand most of the elements of this piece on a relatively straightforward project, or just on one complex project at a time. Proficient, we'd expect to be able to not only have a deep understanding of the knowledge, but also to be able to optimize and evaluate our approach if the first time we've tried to do it, things aren't working well, right? So there's a scale that sits in there, and the idea is that you can get the framework, reflect on where you are and what you can do, and what your journey has been to date, and that will help. And you can sort of ask yourself, reflective questions, challenging questions. You can triangulate by talking to colleagues or doing peer reviews, and that will give you an idea of where you currently sit in your development path. And then, as you can see top right, the APM have developed a set of role descriptions for 4 tracks within the project management delivery profession. So there are role descriptions that give different levels of competence for master project manager, advanced program manager, PMO specialist, or PMO officer. And that's another way of you checking where your self-assessment against what the expectations are of the preeminent professional body in the UK. Should also note that there are competencies that reflect 4 sort of major areas of activity on a project. So there's setting up for success, there's preparing for change, people and behaviours and how we interact with colleagues, and planning and managing deployment, which are like the technical competencies. So it's a massive resource. We have ILX has a tool which you can access that enables you to conduct a sort of self-assessment against this piece, and will help you to sort of calculate where you are in terms of your readiness to deliver or opportunities for self-improvement. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So what you're looking at on screen at the moment is something that we help organisations to sort of put together once they've completed this kind of self-assessment, and we call about it as a competence league table. So you see, which is all of the competencies that were in the self-assessment ranked against the sort of knowledge scores for everybody who is completing the self-assessment, and that will show you where you currently are. And then with using a visualization tool like this, if you look at the competencies that are highlighted in sort of slightly, so whatever that color is, slightly pale orange, those would be the ones that we want to prioritize for development this year. So you could say, over this period, I want to really focus on lifting our scores for business case and benefits management, for example, because they sit in the lower sort of half of the table. So again, it's a way of looking at challenging our personal perceptions and our biases to think about, we think we're pretty good at projects, but if what we actually say is we're good at these aspects of the project, then there may be people in our organization who are looking at the pipeline of projects that are coming up, thinking we're going to have to be better than this at business case, at benefits management, at managing reviews, in order to make sure that we retain our strategic direction. Again, it's a way of organizing our experience so that we can move on and develop. So again, just as a quick point, I mentioned that there are now 29 competencies in the APM competence framework. I've listed them down here according to their groupings and so on. And I think probably what you can see from that is it's a well-rounded set of competencies. If you're looking to understand where you are in your development at the moment, or how you might develop, then it's a pretty comprehensive set of pieces for us to sort of expand that. And clearly you can focus on particular areas, or you can make certain competencies, certain priorities dependent on the role that you're looking to move into, or if you're a head of a project, or if you're looking at your project management capability, where you want the team to focus on in improving and enhancing their delivery. So speaking of which, it's perfectly possible, of course, to think about what our capability is to deliver as a project organization, and using an assessment framework and role descriptions, we can understand what things we should be good at as an entry-level project manager, up to those things that we should be good at as a master level project manager, for example. And we can say that there are, so for example, using a table like this, we can indicate that if we have a non-complicated project, it'd probably be inefficient to put one of our best on it, unless there was a really good reason why one of the most capable PMs in the team needed to be focused on that. If they were doing standard projects, then we would assume that they'd be able to take on multiple of those sorts of standard pieces, and even if we had multiple complex pieces, they might be able to do that. And once we've figured out where we are in terms of our delivery capability as individuals in the role, and so we've figured out what the types of projects are and which competencies they pull on, which we'd have to be good at to be resilient and effective in that piece, then we can start to figure out what kind of capability do we need based on the projects we have today and the projects that we think we're going to have tomorrow. Okay. Once we've done that, then there's a fairly straightforward process that we can move through that it develops our individual, the capability of our individual teams. So we benchmark to figure out where we are at the moment. So look at it results in something like that league table that we were looking at before. Then if we've also looked at our process capability through a model like the P3M3, we can see that we have a low individual capability in financial management, but we have strong financial management processes. So maybe that's not a priority for our development this year. We'll rely on the strength of the process and people doing the same way to make sure that we manage our budgets and our business cases appropriately. Right? We look forward then, so we look forward and look at what kind of projects are we going to have in the future, which competencies are they going to tax, which skills are we going to have to sort of deliver, which processes will have to be most resilient, and based on that demand, we produce a plan that delivers capability. And what you can then do is you have tools that you're at your disposal to be able to monitor your development and also focus development activities. So the little example there is an organisation that sort of baselined the level of or the percentage of people in the team who are at the entry level in 23, intermediate level in 23, and advanced in 23, and master in 23. And then you can see, having run a development program and then rechecked, that they've managed to change the balance of that piece, which implies that they have, so having more intermediate and more advanced project managers would indicate that they're able to rise to the challenge of delivering more projects more effectively. Right? So same numbers in the team, but with increased capability, being able to do more things more effectively. And you can keep building and keep reviewing that process on an annual or biannual basis to tune your capability and check against your league table, and therefore be able to develop the right capability at the right time. So final poll for you, if that's okay. I was wondering if you think about within the organizations that you work, which bits of the teams are using competency frameworks to support development. Is it the delivery teams and the portfolio program or project management? Is it do the IT guys under, for example, their service management use those pieces? Are there other models that we haven't mentioned today that are in use, or we don't use competence frameworks, it's self-explanatory. Okay, so it's paying out. So yeah, no surprise to note that if we're up to 55%, I think, for 3 p.m. pieces, because I suppose there's a long and established convention across the 3 p.m. piece for using these committees, whether it's the PMI or the APM or the IPMA. Also see that nearly 40% of us now are not using competence frameworks at the moment. So I would urge you to seek them out and see if you can find one that is right for you. As I say, we think that the APM competence framework is a good way to work. So in terms of moving into competitive advantage, I think that it's a happy, harmonious combination. Right? If we look at the skills and the competencies that individuals have, we develop an unbiased view of what their current delivery capability is, then we can target our development actions to move that capability, to mature that capability, so that we get into the position where we can, with the same number of people, we can deliver multiple single or indeed complex pieces by upping the capability and the effectiveness of our individuals, right? To complement that, by getting more mature in our process delivery, we can massively increase the accuracy of our forecasting. So we know not only what the capabilities are that we will need to deliver our projects, but also what our capacity is to deliver them. So we can get significantly more accurate in our forecasting than we can tell. And we get more accurate in forecasting because we've got performance management. If we get up to level 4, we've got performance management data that tells us just how good we are at management control, organisational governance, and how repeatable that capability is. Right? We know we know what our capacity is to deliver. We know what the capacity of our people is to execute. Then we can significantly increase our opportunities to succeed in project delivery and rise to the challenges that we encounter. And that's what I wanted to tell you. Really, I hope it was of some interest. I know that we will be talking in a second about how we can support you in learning a little bit more and perhaps practicing some of the stuff that I've been trying to very hastily describe here today. So on that, I think it is now my time to hand back to my colleague Sidra.
Thank you, Mike. Very interesting. Yeah, I just wanted to say a few words. Obviously, that was a lot of interesting information about the organizational capability assessment as well as the individual capability assessment. If you would like to find out more, please contact us. You can speak with our team. You can either contact us via the email communication you'll receive as a follow-up or via our website. We can share more information about the package options and pricing, and our team is happy to schedule a personalized call to demonstrate the assessment tool, either of them, and to provide your organization with a test access for the individual capability assessment if you want to try it out yourself for your organization. It has definitely advantages and allows you to have a targeted learning journey, a personalized learning journey for your team members and for yourself. And obviously, we have also some client feedback and case studies. So, yeah, definitely reach out to us if you are interested to learn more about the presented frameworks. Thank you. So I think we are now going on to back to Etty with some incoming questions. Handing over.
Yeah, thanks very much, both. That was really, really useful, really interesting. Hope you all agree. As Sidra mentioned, it's now time for the sort of Q&A portion of the webinar. We've not had any questions through yet, but if anyone has any questions, please pop those up in the little question box, which you'll see in the right-hand corner of your screen. Yeah, we'll give it a few minutes. Hopefully a few questions will start to roll in. First question is, what are the principal differences on the doctrines of APM, PMI, and Prince 2?
Cool. Well, that's a long answer. Okay. But I suppose two key points. Both the APM and the PMI are based on bodies of knowledge. For many years they were very closely aligned. More recently, we've seen some diversion from the two, so that the PMI and the APM bodies of knowledge are now quite different in the way that they work. And the Prince 2 standard it focuses more on process description and delivery than it does on the those sort of body of knowledge. So APM and PMI are a set of tools that you can deploy on a project, and Prince 2 is a method for project delivery. So I suppose those are, at a high level, the principal points of divergence.
Great. The next question is, how long does an assessment take for an organisation?
It's a very good question, and the self-assessments, depending on how much reflection you would tend to do, would be, we generally suggest that people need to put a set aside about 25 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that, whether that's for an individual or doing the organisational piece. If you do the self-assessment on P3M3, there are essentially 21 points of response. So depending on how well you know the organisation and your project experience, you should be able to give a quick indication on that. There are 29 competencies in the APM competence framework. So again, the reflection is always worthwhile in these things, but so some questions will be answered quicker than others. But yeah, it doesn't take a lot of time to gather the data. Okay, for a full assessment, then you're looking at 4 times, I think, the number of data points in there, and they tend to be developed through workshops, focus groups, one-to-one interviews, and through a certain amount of evidence gathering. So that takes a bit longer. But it gives you a more, the output is significantly more sort of comprehensive and actionable as well.
Okay. We've had a follow-up question to the previous one about the differences between APM, PMI, and Prince 2. So this person's just said what kind of helps you decide which framework is right for you to adopt in your organisation.
Yeah. I think there's a regional aspect to that as well, but certainly if you're based in the UK, then the APM is our primary professional body. Yeah? So if you wanted to develop your skills and gain qualifications that would have recognition in the UK, then I would imagine, and if you wanted to, for example, become a chartered practitioner at some point in your delivery, then it would make sense to focus on the APM. The PMI has is controlled through the Project Management Institute in the US, and so you're entering into a different relationship with them if you wanted to use their full suite of development tools. But and I suppose if you were reflecting on opportunities in the job market, then you would probably want to reflect on which was the sort of dominant approach in the region before sort of making a choice. But I think increasingly there are routes to accreditation that will take into account your personal development efforts under both of those bodies of knowledge, and there's still a significant amount of commonality across them in terms of the techniques that they describe and the individual elements of the body of knowledge.
Okay, makes sense. Someone's just said that they're having a bit of a problem getting management on board. What are some sort of positive outcomes from taking the full assessment that we could potentially sort of recommend that might help them get that approval?
Data, so we can give a data-based decision-making piece. Hopefully, challenge to or removal of bias in the way that we're interpreting performance information at the moment. Being able to be a lot more accurate in terms of the diagnostic. So if we think that there's an issue around our issue management, for example, if there are lots of things that seem to be going wrong, and then it's possibly that there is a problem with the way that we're handling changes and variations, but it might also be a symptom that we're not doing risk management terribly well. If we're not, dealing with things that could go wrong that are foreseeable, then that would tend to indicate that there's an area there where we could get a significant improvement that would make everybody's lives better. So it's a way, if you're struggling to get direct engagement from a senior team, then being able to present an evidence-based argument that says this is where we believe the areas of improvement are to target and it's unbiased, it's neutral, it comes from the standard itself is not generated for any particular sector or specialism or any of those sorts of things. It's purely about delivery practice. And in that sense, it can say, here are some effective guidelines that work everywhere. So you can use it to develop that argument.
Okay. Another question has come through that says, what competency assessment tools can be adopted?
If I understand the question, then we certainly described the APM competence framework today. It's recently been updated, so back in beginning of last year, I think version 3 came out, so it reflects a lot of the current sort of concerns that we have across the wider community around sustainability and diversity, inclusion and equality and so on, as well as giving us an update on the competencies and skills that are popular, including, so for example, it focuses on iterative delivery as well as linear delivery, as we'd expect in an agile world. For those sitting directly outside the project and program and portfolio delivery. You may well have come across Saville, which is the skills for the information age. That is a similar kind of model. It's maturing as well, and that helps us with some other areas of delivery, particularly those that sit in the service management and IT pieces. So that also worth a look at. But if your focus is primarily project management, then the APMCF is where I'd start.
Someone said in the organisation they work for, there's a strong need to increase the competencies of fellow colleagues to work to be more project based. Would P3M be a good starting point, or would you recommend APM?
So if the issue is that they have less experience, colleagues have less experience of delivering projects, then it would certainly be worth looking at the process effectiveness of the organisation at the moment. If we have process methods and controls around the way we do risk or the way we do resource management or something, and they are not being used, or they're not being adopted, or they're not being used to advantage, then we can, if you use the P3M3 model, for example, you can quickly highlight where there is an area of say underperformance, or where it's being inconsistently done. Okay, as a result of doing that, you can then look at whether or not, using a competence framework, is that because people have a knowledge gap around resource management, they know how to do it, or is it because they are, it's the tools or the processes that aren't being enforced. They aren't, they know how to do it, but then no one's asking them for it, right? So by using both of those approaches, we can understand where to apply the development urgency or pressure in order to be able to work it through. So, I mean, it doesn't take a long time to get a quick indication through these through the models that I've been discussing today. So developing both in parallel is probably the most effective way to go about doing it and to answer that question.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So we've had another question through that says, that's asking about benchmarking. It says, if they understand correctly, doing a full assessment will give them an insight into where they stand in regards to sort of the industry and other competitors. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the way that the P3M3 model works is that there are so Axelos people who own the standard maintain a database of information from all the assessments that get certified, and all of the self-assessments that take place that pass through their sort of database. Okay, as a result of doing a formal assessment, you can indeed get access to precisely that information. So it will tell you what your relative strengths are versus organisations in your sector of a similar sort of size and sort of geographical location as well. So there's definitely benchmarking information that's out there, and it can be very helpful guidance for us. The one of the challenges that we have with that is that at the self-assessment level, you don't always have reliable information about where organisations are in the assessment cycle. So have they self-assessed themselves right at the beginning of their journey, or have they, as a result of trying to focus on development, have they now checked to sort of re-baseline themselves? So, but at the formal assessment level, then we can definitely get access to more granular information.
Great, thanks very much, Mike. We're coming up to the hour mark, so I think that's pretty much all of the questions for now anyway. We did have a few through about sort of how you get in touch if you want to organise a meeting or book a call to discuss sort of this a bit more. If you already have an assigned contact at ILX, if you drop them an email and get in touch, then I'm sure they'll be happy to organise a call with you. If not, then we do have a corporate training page on our website, and there's a form that you can fill out on there to book a meeting with one of our contacts, and they'll be happy to organise that for you. yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thanks again, Sidra and Mike, for your help with this one. I'm sure, as everyone will agree, it's been a really interesting session. We do have a few sort of a few more webinars planned in the next couple of months. So keep an eye out on our sort of social channels and our emails that are coming through for sort of further information about those. And yeah, as mentioned earlier, you will be sent a recording to this, and it will also be live on YouTube in the next couple of days, so you can access it there as well. Thanks very much, everyone, and have a lovely rest of your day.